Here's what's coming up today. Fighting continues between the Israeli army and Palestinian militants in Gaza as international calls also continue for a ceasefire. More than 90 people are missing in the wake of Cyclone Tuakte on the Indian city of Mumbai. Plus, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says a serious crisis is brewing because of the sudden influx of migrants in the Spanish enclave of Ceuta. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. Calls are growing for a speedy ceasefire between the Israeli army and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Jordanian King Abdullah II have joined in. Both leaders agree that initiatives for a speedy ceasefire should be supported in order to create the conditions for the resumption of political negotiations. Also, the Thai Foreign Ministry has confirmed that 2 of its citizens have died and 8 others wounded in an attack launched into southern Israel. Here's more. Well, on Monday, we'll get you more of that report in just a moment. But on Monday, we reported that the Turkish president blaming the United States President Joe Biden for his support for Israel, which he says is helping to kill civilians in the Gaza Strip while targeting Hamas militants. A lot more people are looking towards a U.S. involvement to end the fighting between Israel and Hamas and spare the loss of more lives in the conflict. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, reports.
The U.S. president calls for ceasefire in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
He stressed the need for Hamas to cease firing rockets into Israel and affirmed, again, Israel's right to defend itself against terrorist attacks. As I would note from the reports, there have been more than 3,000 rockets that have been shot from Hamas into Israel over the last several days. He also expressed his concern that this current period of conflict has tragically claimed the lives of Israeli and Palestinian civilians. Our focus, our goal, every single action we take, every statement we make is with the objective of reducing the violence and bringing an end to the conflict on the ground.
While President Biden has called for a ceasefire, many are questioning why he has not spoken out against the Palestinian human rights violations.
Our hope is that President Biden will get off the sidelines, publicly and forcefully condemn the war crimes the Israeli government is committing against the Palestinian people, and then take concrete action to stop those war crimes. Right now, the White House is essentially enabling and justifying the bombing of civilians, the bombing of civilian infrastructure. They even failed to condemn the bombing of a building that contained the Associated Press and other media outlets. So we have been incredibly disappointed and deeply disturbed by the administration's response to the violence so far. And this has got to change. People are dying every day because the White House will not get off the sidelines, get involved publicly, and stop the killing.
While the U.S. government has not taken a hard stance on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the U.S. Muslim community is asking for more.
It's almost like the White House is using the response playbook from, 1988. I mean, things have changed. A wide swath of the American public now recognizes that Palestinian lives matter, that Palestinian human rights matter, and that it is not acceptable for our government to fund human rights violations overseas, right? Tens of thousands of people, if not more, protesting in cities across America and around the world last week and demanding an end to this violence. So look, I would not be surprised to see this sort of response from a White House run by President Trump or President Bush. But for a President Biden, this has been stunning. It's been disappointing. It's been disturbing. I'm almost out of words to describe how angry and frustrated the Muslim community is, the civil rights community is, the human rights community is by what we're seeing.
The call for America to do more to address the Israeli-Palestinian conflict could be a major determining factor for the future of U.S. foreign relations. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
Well, Maria joins us now from Washington. Maria, yesterday we learned the U.S. President Joe Biden approved $735 million in arms sale to Israel. That certainly looks like America is back in the conflict rather than working towards a ceasefire. What feelers are you getting?
You're exactly correct. Many Americans are extremely surprised by the backing of this administration from the standpoint of the selling of arms and all of what has been provided as far as for the actual war. And so I think that what Americans are looking for is they're looking to see if the business community is going to obviously, stand up and say something against this to the federal government. And where is President Biden going to stand as we look to have a new chapter in American history term, not just a new chapter as it relates to moving away from the Trump administration, but a new chapter in the way in which the U.S. Responds to Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Right, so we're seeing these calls for a ceasefire coming from other countries such as the UK, France, Germany, even Russia and China, and America's leading voice is absent. How is the Biden administration reacting to accusations that it's the real killer of civilians in this conflict?
It's a bit different than what we've seen as they've done in the past with other human rights violations across the world. And so you're seeing them focusing in on both sides, having a peaceful moving away from the violence and very almost planned and strategically thought out comments as it relates to the conflict. Now, is that a result of just the politics of the long-standing relationship between the U.S. and Israel? That's a question I think that many people are beginning to ask. Or is it really that the U.S. Is not interested in addressing the human rights violations of the Palestinian people that have been obviously seen through this conflict? And so what we're going to see is we're going to definitely see the Congress beginning to speak out, because Congress, represents the people. So you'll probably begin to see Congress really pushing for President Biden to say something and to say something more than just ceasefire. But again, even the call for ceasefire that we obviously heard as a result of the call yesterday is one that was a little bit more than what we've seen in the past few days. And so now it's going to be, is the U.S. going to take action as it relates to the way in which they conduct business? And are they going to be a major voice and a leader and obviously looking for peace?
Well, staying with America's leadership in this, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said earlier today that Washington had received further information about Israel's destruction of a Gaza high-rise that housed the local offices of the Associated Press and Al Jazeera news organizations, but did not comment on it. Not much has been said by this administration about the conflict at all. Is America affected by what's happening? What about those who say the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian militants will be the downfall of the Biden administration?
That is what we're hearing, and that is going to definitely be a hard hit to not just the administration, but the Democratic Party, because obviously the Democratic Party has seen a resurgence through the Biden administration. And so with this type of a lack of real clear, concrete voice against human rights issues that exist, wherever you stand on the line and wherever President Biden stands on the line, I think the real issue that many Americans, and especially those in his base, are going to be questioning is why have there not been fair treatment and fair voicing of the human rights violations on both sides, whether it's Israelis or Palestinians. I mean, obviously, there's a very large Muslim community in the U.S. and obviously globally, which is watching and that have been in support of President Biden in the past. And so this will definitely potentially have some damaging impacts, not only on this administration, but potentially the Democratic Party.
Thanks again, Maria, for this.
Thank you for having me.
Well, earlier we told you about the growing international calls for a ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinians. Let's take a listen to what some of the world leaders have to say about this.
It was a Palestinian rocket strike that killed the two Thai workers at the packaging factory in the Ashkelon region of southern Israel. Gaza's ruling Hamas Islamist group and Islamic Jihad have claimed responsibility for the attack. Meanwhile, as both sides continue to retaliate airstrikes, Gaza medical officials say 213 Palestinians have been killed, including 61 children and 36 women, and more than 1,400 wounded in Israeli strikes on the coastal enclave. Israeli authorities say 12 people have been killed in Israel, including 2 children. In the meantime, Israel bombarded Gaza with airstrikes and Palestinian militants resumed cross-border rocket fire today after a brief overnight lull. Nearly 450 buildings in the Gaza Strip have been destroyed or badly damaged, including 6 hospitals and 9 primary care health centers. Some 47,000 of the 52,000 displaced had fled to UN schools. Israel says more than 3,450 rockets have been launched at it from Gaza, some falling short and others shot down by its Iron Dome air defenses. The army said its forces have killed around 130 Hamas fighters and another 30 from Islamic Jihad.
Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа.
International calls are growing for a ceasefire. Russian President Vladimir Putin said there was a large number of civilian victims. Germany has pledged 40 million euros to ramp up humanitarian aid for civilians in Gaza, where thousands of Palestinians have been displaced by the latest Israeli airstrikes. The UN as well says it is actively engaging all sides towards an immediate cessation of fire between Israelis and the Palestinians. Hamas has been firing rockets 8 days ago.
We continue to receive reports of significant displacement of Palestinians, with over 38,000 internally displaced people seeking protection in 48 schools run by UNRWA across the Gaza Strip. Over 2,500 people have been made homeless due to the destruction of their homes. 41 educational facilities, including schools, 2 kindergartens, and an UNRWA vocational center, and a higher educational facility have been damaged, according to our people on the ground.
Hamas began firing rockets 8 days ago in retaliation for what it said were Israeli rights abuses against Palestinians in Jerusalem. Israeli leaders say they would press on for now with an offensive to destroy the capabilities of the armed factions Hamas and Islamic Jihad.
To other news now, more than 90 people are missing after a barge sank off the coast of the Indian city of Mumbai amid a severe cyclone. The Indian Navy said it had rescued 177 of the 270 people on board and that efforts are ongoing to find more survivors. 3 other commercial barges carrying about 700 people are stranded at sea in the wake of Cyclone Taukte, which has battered India's western coast. Taukte weakened after it made landfall on Monday, still leaving 19 people dead. The stricken barge, owned by India's Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, ONGC, was carrying personnel deployed for offshore drilling. When the storm struck, the barge's anchors gave way and it began drifting. Well, still ahead on the program. Amanda Ameshi talks to us about being recognized in Scotland's 30 under 30. Stay with us. Welcome back to the program. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says there's currently no conclusive evidence to cause the delay to plans to remove coronavirus restrictions in England next month. This follows reports that British Prime Ministers are considering contingency plans for local lockdowns or a delay to reopening after June 21 in response to concerns about the spread of the virus variant first detected in India. Meanwhile, Singapore has authorized the use of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for those aged 12 to 15 years old in a bid to extend protection to more groups as the country tackles a recent increase of infections. And in Taiwan, soldiers have been mobilized at the main Taipei subway station amid a resurgence of domestic COVID-19 cases on the island.
Well, we're looking at the epidemiology the whole time as it comes in, and at the moment, I think partly because we've built up such a wall of defences with the vaccination programme, I don't see anything conclusive at the moment to say that we need to deviate from the roadmap. But we've got to be cautious, and we're keeping everything under very close observation. We'll know a lot more in a few days' time. I think it's very important for people to understand that if you go to an amber-list country, if you absolutely have to go for some pressing reason, not a holiday, if you have to go, then bear in mind you're going to have to pay for testing, you're going to have to do passenger locator form, all that kind of thing, but you're also going to have to self-isolate for 10 days at home, not going out, and if you fail to obey that, then you will face fines of up to £10,000. So people need to understand that an amber list country is definitely not a green list country.
Another piece of good news is that the Health Services Authority, HSA, has also extended authorization for the use of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for individuals aged 12 to 15 years. And our expert committee on COVID-19 vaccination has also weighed in on that endorsement, with their endorsement.
Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says that a serious crisis is brewing with a sudden influx of migrants swimming into the Spanish enclave of Ceuta in northern Africa, although Spain and Morocco both gave signs of seeking to defuse a tense situation. Spain deployed troops to Ceuta to patrol the border with Morocco after as many as 6,000 migrants, including some 1,500 minors, entered the enclave on Monday and Tuesday by swimming in or climbing over the fence. Soldiers in armored vehicles were guarding Ceuta's beach on Tuesday. One reporter on the ground said the number of arrivals by sea had slowed, and a number of those who had arrived were voluntarily returning to Morocco. Spain said approximately 2,700 migrants had already been sent back to Morocco, where they were being accepted under a readmission deal. The regional leader of Ceuta criticized what he described as Morocco's passive stance in the face of Monday's surge, and some independent experts said Rabat had initially allowed it as a means of pressuring Madrid over its decision to admit a rebel leader from the Western Sahara to a Spanish hospital. However, the Spanish government did not make that connection, but rather maintained a positive tone towards Morocco, with Sanchez calling the North African nation a friend of Spain, and the Interior Ministry citing cooperation over the readmissions. Well, 21 African leaders are in Paris for a summit on African economies and finding ways to help the continent post-COVID-19. On Monday, French President Emmanuel Macron welcomed world leaders in Paris's Élysée presidential palace. African heads of state, including Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari, Egypt's Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Burkina Faso's Roch Marc Kabore, South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa and Chad's Prime Minister arrived one by one at the presidential palace. The summit aims to discuss ways of providing financial support to aid African economies relaunch after the COVID-19 crisis, which President Macron calls a new deal for the continent's nations. Amanda Amechi, a high-achieving British-Nigerian resident residing in Scotland, has been speaking to our London correspondent, Juliana Olayinka, about her recent recognition, becoming the Young Scot of the Year. The 16-year-old writer and campaigner says she overcame her shyness and a lack of confidence to make her voice heard on a range of issues which matter to young people in the UK.
I found out at the end of last month, they had the Glasgow Times. They had like a Facebook live stream of the whole event because, unfortunately, it couldn't be in person because of the pandemic. But I was basically watching it in my living room with my parents, like on the TV, and then we were just we were watching the whole event. It was really lovely, like seeing all the other finalists and everything that everyone's done. It was really incredible, like everyone's stories, and then. Basically, they announced first who won the Young Scotswoman of the Year, and then when we realized it was me, basically my parents, me and my parents and I both started we all started screaming and just jumping up and down, and it was really exciting, and it's just I couldn't believe what had happened. And then before I even knew it, there were people tweeting me on Twitter, messaging me, being well done, before I'd even had the chance to say, and it was just. All the support and love I'd gotten from everyone, online and from my family, my friends, my classmates, and it was just really incredible, and I'm really thankful. Firstly, it must be noted that there are quite a lot of young people in Scotland and the UK who are already politically active, which is really good. For example, obviously I'm part of Girl Guiding, Advocate and Young Scot, and although neither of these organisations are we don't support any political party. Through these organisations, I have been able to raise my voice about things that concern young people, and I do get to speak to decision makers, which is really cool. And there's a Scottish Youth Parliament as well, which I'm not involved in, but I have friends who are involved in that. So they're democratically elected. They represent their constituency and they campaign for issues that affect young people. And there are young people involved in protests, Fridays for Future, or doing stuff in their local community. And this is really great. But there are, as you say, there are young people who aren't as politically active. And the world of politics can be very daunting and very confusing. And it does seem quite a lot of the time that many politicians, not all politicians, but many, it seems that they don't really listen to young people's voices, don't really value what young people have to say. So I'd say that in order to ensure that more young people participate in politics.
Congratulations to the Young Scot of the Year. Well, that's the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.